Yomamba Murana Manachotam Haderech Belayla Be'amurish Le'ayir Lahem 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 Yomamba Murana Belayla Be'amurish Ba'muranan Ba'amurish Yomamba Layla Yomamba Muranan Belayla Ba'amurish Ba'muranan Ba'amurish Yomamba Layla Yomamba Muranan Manachotam Haderech Belayla Ba'amurish Le'ayir Lahem Yomamba Murana Manachotam Haderech Belayla Ba'amurish Le'ayir Lahem Yomamba Murana Belayla Ba'amurish Ba'murana Ba'amurish Yomamba Layla Yomamba Murana Belayla Ba'amurish Ba'murana Ba'amurish Yomamba Layla Yomamba Murana Manachotam Haderech Belayla Ba'amurish Le'ayir Lahem Yomamba Murana Manachotam Haderech Belayla Ba'amurish Le'ayir Lahem Yomamba Murana Belayla Ba'amurish Ba'murana Ba'amurish Yomamba Layla Yomamba Murana Belayla Ba'amurish Ba'murana Ba'amurish Yomamba Layla Yomamba Murana Manachotam Haderech Belayla Ba'amurish Le'ayir Lahem Yomamba Murana Manachotam Haderech Belayla Ba'amurish Le'ayir Lahem Yomamba Ba'amud anan, ba'amud eish, yomam ba'layla. Yomam ba'amud anan, ba'layla ba'amud eish. Ba'amud anan, ba'amud eish, yomam ba'layla. Yomam ba'amud anan, Lanachotam haderech belayla be'amud eish le'ayir lahem. Yomam ba'amud anan lanachotam haderech belayla be'amud eish le'ayir lahem. Good evening, friends. So, thank you, Marjorie. That was an original composition. I'm still tweaking the words. I didn't find in my internet searching of the usual suspects of Jewish chant composition a chant that I liked about clouds, so I decided I should compose one. It's so ubiquitous, the imagery of this pillar of cloud and this pillar of fire that leads the Israelite people on the wanderings through the wilderness, that I don't know how many of us really think about what that would feel like. So I've actually been personally very drawn to this imagery and to the challenge of the imagery for years. Over 10 years ago, when I was working at the Isabella Friedman Jewish Retreat Center and having a bit of a existential crisis of the sort that is common among young 20-somethings who have recently graduated college and don't know what they're doing with their lives yet. I actually wrote a different song that was exploring this metaphor of what it would mean to be following a cloud and a cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night, to be walking toward the fog, to be walking toward the thing that is obscured and obscuring and a little bit chilling, and how disorienting that must be, and of course how that itself is a metaphor for leaving the familiar and going to something unknown. So I find this metaphor personally for the divine both very compelling and very challenging. The divine in the murkiness, the divine in that which is difficult and necessary to approach. And there is a phrase, I can't remember, I'm sorry to say, if I have invoked it thus far in the class, but it's referred to in the Kabbalistic literature as well as in the Midrash, Hester Panim, hiddenness of face, the hiding of the divine presence, that refers to certain epics in Jewish history, as well as the personal experience that many of us might feel at various points in our lives of not being able to access the divine, or feeling like the divine is in some very obscure relationship with us. So I want to just start by honoring that and honoring the richness of the idea of a cloud, and the idea of a cloud as that which leads us, that which we need to move towards, that which we need to move with. I loved Rabbi Spitzer's reflection in this chapter that water vapor is always around us, and it's only when it gets dense enough, and it only is when it interacts with something, that it turns into a cloud that we can see. And even when we can see it, and even when we're in it, it's not an it. It's not a tangible item that we can touch or hold. And I think that too is a very live part of the experience of seeking the divine. That even if we're having the experience that feels really in it, it's not something we can hold on to. I don't know. I don't think I've invoked the book Eat, Pray, Love, at least not many times in this class, by the bestseller by Elizabeth Gilbert from a few years back. But she has this wonderful description of a moment in India in an ashram where she finally encounters God. She has a moment of what in the Hindu tradition is called Kundalini Shakti, and she's sitting there feeling herself held in the palm of God's hand in the divine in a cool blue light, and she thinks to herself, I wish I could stay here forever. And as soon as she thinks that, she starts falling away, sliding away from it. And she thinks, no, I didn't mean it. Let me get back there to being present. And then she slides away from it. So I appreciate that aspect as well, that I find evoked for me personally by the cloud imagery. We'll be looking at the sort of ephemeral nature of cloud. And I think, which speaks to the fact that the connection that we feel sometimes is not something we can hold. It's something that is constantly changing. So before we go into the text, though, I did want to invite some exploration, which I apologize, I've meant to do every class and forgotten to do, which is just the practices from previous weeks of rocks or water or place or voice. A little bit of reflection. It can be your own personal journaling, or you can share in the chat. Did they work for you? How did they work for you? Did you try them? Did anything surprise you in trying them? I'm going to pause for a moment for you to consider if you did any practices with the previous week's metaphors that are worth noting for yourself or for the group. Practices don't necessarily need to be a weighty thing. My mother likes to tell this story of going on a meditation retreat, a silent meditation retreat, a few years ago for rabbis, and it was an entirely silent retreat, except that, you know, at one or two points during the week, people could have one-on-one conversations with the teacher. And she told her teacher, I always get so much out of these, and then I don't know how to keep anything of the practice when I go home. I'm so busy that it's hard to make time for mindfulness. And the teacher said, you know, you could try being mindful even when you're busy. Even when you're hurrying. Thanking Healing Rock. Awesome. It's interesting how much the rush of our lives gets in the way of attending to the rock of our lives, so to speak. All right, well, let's go into the text. And as we did last week, we got some positive feedback about that format. So I'm going to share in the, well, I guess I'm not going to share in the chat the document I sent, because we'll just be going through it, at least for right now. The first excerpt that I want us to look at begins on page 157 and goes to page 158. It's not very long. It is the nature of clouds right before the extended quote to the end of the paragraph that spills onto the next page. So can I have a volunteer to read that excerpt, please? Go ahead, Julie. Thank you.
It is the nature of clouds to obscure things from view, while also making something that is usually invisible visible. As the folks at NASA explain, water vapor is always in the sky in some amount, but is invisible. Clouds form when an area of air becomes cooler until the water vapor there condenses to liquid form. At that point, the air is said to be saturated with water vapor. The air where the clouds form must be cool enough for the water vapor to condense. The water will condense around things like dust, ice, or sea salt, all known as condensation nuclei. The temperature, wind, and other conditions where a cloud forms determine what type of cloud it will be. The authors of the Bible most likely did not know all of the science behind the formation of clouds, but they did understand an aspect of reality that a scientific definition of clouds make clear, that something life-sustaining and ever-present, whether water vapor or the divine, can be both unseen and very much there. I mean, it's very important. Indeed, it is where the water vapor is the atmosphere both cools down and interacts with other objects in the atmosphere, dust, ice, salt, that it becomes visible as a cloud. So too, the biblical texts about God as cloud imply that God, invisible presence, becomes visible when it interacts with human beings. Should I continue?
Thank you.
I think
Nope, that's perfect. Thank you.
okay.
So I just love that point that a cloud itself is a relationship, or at least the visibility of the cloud itself is the manifestation of a relationship. And so I invite you to consider and journal on this question. What life-sustaining and ever-present aspects of your reality, and that phrase life-sustaining and ever-present is a quote from what Julie just read, become clear only when you deliberately focus on them or deliberately choose to relate to them. I invite you to take a few minutes and journal on that question. Okay, I'm noticing that people are starting to answer the question in the chat. So it's funny, I also journaled gratitude. It's something that is very easy not to experience. And it's very easy to get into a mode of entitlement or resentment, but gratitude is quite life-sustaining. Question is too complicated for me. Okay, I apologize for asking too complicated a question. It actually, based on the answers, I'm wondering if I asked too vague a question. So for the purposes of your discussion and future journaling, I'll modify it to what life-sustaining and ever-present aspects of reality only wind up existing when you make time to be in relationship with them. That should narrow it down because we actually breathe even if we're not focusing on it. Oh, I'm sorry, I moved the phone so it wouldn't clack when I was typing. I'll rephrase that. I don't know if the head shaking and grimacing was because you couldn't hear me. I said I'm going to modify the question because I'm getting feedback in the chat that it's a little bit too vague. And so I'm modifying it to what life-sustaining and potentially ever-present aspects of your reality only exist when you make the effort to be in relationship with them. I will write that in the chat as well.
You're still kind of muffled. I don't know what you should do.
Sorry. It will be worse if I switch to computer audio because it will cut out every time I look at one of my other documents. In any case, at this point, we're going to turn things over to another volunteer to read our next selection, which will start on page 161, While the Divine Cloud. Suppose if you really want to read the Joni Mitchell quote, you can. Or you can skip the Joni Mitchell quote and just start with the paragraph below it. And goes to 162 at the bottom of the page, and so he goes towards it. May have a volunteer to read
I will.
that.
Okay. Going into the cloud, rows and flows of angel hair and ice cream castles in the air and feather canyons everywhere. I've looked at clouds that way, but now they only block the sun. They rain and snow on everyone. From Joni Mitchell, Both Sides Now. While the divine cloud expresses a sense of God's presence, there are times when the appearance of the cloud is more foreboding than reassuring. One of those times was at Mount Sinai as the Israelites awaited the great revelation. The experience of thunder and lightning and loud sounds frightened the people, and they stood at a distance. But Moses approached the thick cloud where God was. The thick God cloud on Sinai is not like the reassuring column of cloud that accompanied the Israelites on their journey. It's not the airy angel here of the Joni Mitchell song, but the sign of a violent storm about to break. Yet Moses is undeterred. He walks right into the dark, dense cloud. The 18th century Hasidic master Rabbi Nachman of Bratslav understood this scene as a teaching about the obstacles we encounter on the spiritual path. The obstacle is like a thick cloud. This is the meaning of the verse. So the people stood at a distance. When they see the thick cloud, namely the obstacle, they remain at a distance. But Moses, who represents the quality of awareness for all of Israel, approached the thick cloud where God was. Namely, he approached the obstacle where the blessed God is actually hidden. For Rabbi Nachman, the Israelites represent a normal state of consciousness, that is, most of us on most days. In the presence of something that appears to us to be an obstacle, the natural tendency is to back away. Moses, however, represents the quality of awareness, a different kind of understanding. Moses realizes that when what appears to others as daunting or difficult contains God's presence, and so he goes toward it.
Thank you for that beautiful reading. And your question now for journaling is in the chat, but I will also read it. Consider a time when you had to move towards a difficult or uncertain situation. How did you find the clarity to do so? What did you find there? How do you continue to find the power, growth, divine in murky / uncertain / frightening situations? I see that some people are already sharing their ideas in the chat, and that's fine. I hope for those of you who were journaling, you got the start of some thoughts. Remember, we will be going into breakout rooms to discuss in more depth. So for now, we're going to go to one more text, and then I will send you, and one more chance to journal on it, and then I will send you into breakout rooms. We are turning to page 170, near the bottom of the page. The quote from an anonymous congregant of Rabbi Spitzer: "Clouds change quickly," to the very bottom of the opposite page. Look at the sky. And I have a volunteer to read.
Clouds change quickly. One moment the sky can be cloudless. Look up again and clouds are moving in. It shows us that things can change quickly. They may be dark at one moment, but the sun returns. I've been outside at times when it's been really dark and cloudy. Suddenly, some rays of light break through. The world seems transformed and more safe, secure, happy, inspired almost. I'm reminded that life is always changing, not always cloudy and always sunny. Without the contrast of clouds and light, I wouldn't see this. It's wonderful to know that we can radically shift our perspective simply by looking up at the sky, looking at clouds. Oh, I lost the picture. I need to see all of you, sorry. Okay, looking up at clouds, we're able to experience the most basic truth of our existence, that things change moment to moment. The sun may be covered over for a long time. We may go through truly heartbreaking experiences in our lives, but even in the midst of heartbreak, the clouds move and shift. A moment of gratitude can punctuate grief. Just as a ray of sunlight can shine through clouds, the discovery of inner resilience and strength can emerge from the depths of pain. If, as my congregant suggested in her reflection, we can embrace the reality of ongoing, never-ending change, we'll suffer less and sometimes experience exquisite joy. Perhaps that was the reality that Rebbe Nachman was pointing to when he told his student, look at the sky. Grasping at wealth, seeking security in the marketplace, these things bring no lasting satisfaction, which is why there's always the need to get more and more and more. Only by being like the clouds, flowing with the ever-changing winds, is it possible to achieve a modicum of peace. Look at the sky. I like that one.
I'm glad. Thank you, Beth. And I think this is very powerful, especially in contrast with the imagery last week of rock as something that is so permanent and ever present, and to the extent that it changes or evolves, does so very, very slowly. This is sort of a different facet of the divine, which is the facet of impermanence. And so your prompt for your final journaling before you go into breakout rooms to discuss this metaphor, I just posted in the chat, but is, what other aspects of your reality, like clouds, are very powerful but also impermanent? What does it mean to you to find divine in impermanence, in the changes in your own mental state and in the reality around you? Take a few moments for your own writing. I've placed everyone in breakout rooms, but for the purposes of those watching on YouTube, and with apologies for forgetting to turn on the recording after journaling, I just want to note that people are taking time to discuss with each other the prompts that we have been journaling on from these 3 readings. Welcome back, everyone. And please mute yourself, since I can't track who's unmuted and making just a bit of background noise. Welcome back. Would up to 4 people like to share for up to a minute about the insights that arose for you in this time? Emily, are you willing to play timekeeper again? Thank you, Emily. Folks are also welcome to share in the chat, but if anyone would like to raise their hand or just unmute yourselves and take a turn, especially if you haven't already spoken this evening, you're welcome to. From the way things appear on my screen, it looks like someone is nominating someone else, but I can't tell who.
Julie had her hand up.
I did. All right. So I was just saying,
Please,
I
go
was
ahead.
just saying that the impermanence that one of the impermanences that freak me out are children growing up, my children growing up, you know, so that you look at them and you think, like, what happened to that little boy? Like, completely not in the world anymore. And so the divine in that is that something that seems so spectacularly insane, you know, just not feasible, is part of the natural process, you know, and that each stage is a new thing. And then I was thinking about how my students, because I teach at college, they stay the same age all the time. Like, they're always 18 to 22, you know, mostly. And then I have changed my age. I used to be like close to them, and then I was kind of their parents' age, and now I'm kind of like their parents' age. And so they've stayed the same, and I've been changing in relation to them. And then we were talking in the group about how they stay the same age, but they keep changing because the culture keeps changing. And so if you're in a relationship with them and that age was roughly, so it's all that impermanence about growing up and being in relation to growing and changing, that I think there's a lot of space for thinking about just the divinity of growth and creative engagement with that growth.
Awesome. Love that. Especially as a parent. Karen, go ahead.
I'm unmuted, right? I just building on that, because we went in the kind of the logical continuation of that, which is we were talking about our bodies aging and changing, and as I wrote myself, body aging, death, and the fear of death, and basically like kind of that inevitable decline and loss of capacity. And then we were just having a big discussion about whether that should be considered decline or not, or just change. And I think some of us were more wise than me, because other people felt like it was just change. And I'm like, no, it's decline. Anyway.
Beautiful point that we're all actually moving towards something obscure and real, but unholdable and unknown throughout our lives, that we all, that every human being has experienced or will experience, and yet is part of the impermanence of the human condition. Would anyone else like to share? One more minute of potential sharing.
If nobody else is sharing, I just want to say how impressed I was with P. Eshel Morgan Rosemarin's comment about crashing through clouds by skydiving. That just enlivened my heart.
Awesome. Well, on that note, we'll close first with a couple of comments about cloud practices, and then with a repetition of the chant before our official close. So I'm going to share screen. Here we go. Okay, so obviously one cloud practice, and Rabbi Spitzer recommends this, is look at the sky at least once a day, ideally outside, but if you have trouble accessing outside, through a window, just notice how swiftly reality can change as manifest through the clouds in the sky. Unless it's a wintry day in Eugene, in which case it may just be sort of gray and foggy for hours. But I'm sure there's something to be learned by looking at that too. Number 2 is insight meditation. I'm not going to go into a great deal of description about that. She does somewhat. Number 3, I'm suggesting 3 practices of going towards the cloud. One is the practice she writes about, which is a form of meditation. Another, it's funny, number 4 that she recommends is spiritual direction, and I did spiritual direction for many years. One of the best assignments I was given was to give pastoral care for a few minutes every day to my negative internal messages. The voices in my head that tell me, make a big deal about little things. Tell me I'm really stupid. Tell me have no business doing what I'm doing. That kind of thing. And to sort of assume that in every dark thing that arises within me, there is the germ of some legitimate hope, fear, yearning that I can only learn by going towards it. So this is a very specific practice that was given to me that I did for many years and still turn to sometimes. I'll share with all of you, which is that you set when some sort of anxiety or negative self-judgment arises, you set a timer because you don't want to give it too much time. You don't give it more than 3 to 5 minutes. But for those 3 to 5 minutes, you very compassionately ask that voice what it needs, what it's concerned about, and what it needs you to understand. And then when the time is up, you say, thank you so much for telling me. And we're done talking for now. So that's my shorthand for that is the invite negative self-messaging into conversation. You can learn a lot and cultivate actually, perhaps counterintuitively, a great deal of compassion for yourself with this practice. And then similarly, you can do the same thing with other people. I find it often very difficult and very rewarding to reach out to have a conversation that I expect will be difficult, or to a person that I experience as difficult, and just with the posture of there is something beautiful to be experienced by doing this. So those are practices with the cloud metaphor. And next week, we're going to do fire. And then the week after that, we're going to close. And it's going to feel like a very abrupt closing. So I sort of apologize in advance for how abrupt our closing will feel. But I'll do my best to be mindful with my discussion prompts to cushion that abruptness. And Marjorie shares another cloud practice in the chat. There's a meditation practice to watch clouds and not attach to what they might look like or what we might see in them. Beautiful. So we'll just close with a bit of that chant from the beginning, moving towards that cloud, always there, cloud by day, fire by night. Sorry, that's actually inaccurate. It doesn't say pillar of smoke. It says pillar of fire.
I wondered about that.
Yep, that was just my mistake. Yomamba Murana. Oh, I didn't actually screen share. Sorry about that. Here we go. Yomamba Amurana Lanachotam Hadere Laila Ba'amud Eish Le'ayir Lahem Yomamba Amurana Lanachotam Hadere Laila Ba'amud Eish Le'ayir Lahem Yomamba Amurana Laila Ba'amud Eish Ba'amurana Ba'amud Eish Yomam Laila Yomam Ba'amurana Laila Ba'amud Eish Ba'amurana Ba'amud Eish Yomam Laila Yomam Ba'amurana Lanachotam Hadera Laila Ba'amud Eish Le'ayir Lahem Yomam Ba'amurana Lanachotam Hadera Laila Ba'amud Eish Le'ayir Lahem